Anime often have a lot to say, but my favorite thing about the medium is they don't have to say anything. Anime has a whole suite of audiovisual tools with which it can tell stories non-verbally. OST, sound design, animation, cinematography, and even background art and character designs can help inform us about the world, the characters, and their growth. Perhaps my favorite example of this idea is from Liz and the Bluebird, specifically the intro and the outro, wherein we see Mizure and Nozomi walking to the clubroom at the start of the movie, and at the end, walking home. These scenes have a lot to say about the girls and their relationship, using a minimal amount of dialogue. I would love to just show these two scenes back to back, or side to side, and let them speak for themselves. However, I believe the best way to show off their nonverbal storytelling is for me to ironically verbalize what I like about them. The intro begins with Mizure arriving in front of the school. From her deliberate turn back towards the gate and her long, unsteady gaze in that direction, we know she is anticipating someone. Before that someone arrives, another girl walks by first, with little fanfare. No OST, just the same ambient noise. She is plainly shot and plainly animated. Mizure doesn't even look over. But then, Nozomi enters. I really love the way this scene builds the anticipation of Nozomi's arrival. Coming off the long, quiet wait, the OST takes on a lively tempo as we finally hear someone turn the corner. This first step is almost double the length of the regular steps coming up. It hangs for less than a second, but it helps to telegraph this new movement. The peak of audience anticipation is Mizure looking over to Nozomi. Similar to that first step, this timing is extended, hanging between the two for a second, before finally revealing Nozomi as she cheerfully walks up to join Mizure. Now that Mizure has arrived, seeing the girls' body language side by side communicates just how different these two are. Nozomi's movements are full of energy. Her body sways with her steps, her arms swing, her hair bouncing and skirt flicking, all demonstrate her confidence and give her charisma. Mizure, on the other hand, is all around much more reserved. Her shy personality elicits smaller, more subdued poses and movements. Her hair and clothes are still. Her steps are shorter and at a slower tempo. While Nozomi effortlessly leads the way to the band room, Mizure is content to follow her, often mimicking her and always watching her. The shot composition throughout elaborates on their feelings further. As she leads the way, Nozomi is frequently framed above Mizure, with Mizure constantly looking up to her or watching her from a distance. We notice Nozomi looks back occasionally, but it's nothing like Mizure's clear reverence. Close, introspective shots help us empathize with the girls, and long, lingering wides show off the girls moving through the school, a world that, except for them, seems otherwise empty. Something else to note is Mizure's perspective occasionally feels off. Strange angles with unusual focus seems at odds with the mundane setting. These shots exemplify how the girls don't quite see each other clearly, and by extension, don't fully grasp their uncertain, unstable relationship. One of the final scenes in the intro is this beautiful, ethereal shot of the two, representing Misere's idealized perspective/memory. Even here, we see the same difference in body language and the same long separation in the framing. When it comes back to reality, they've arrived at the music room. Nozomi, we see, is anxious to move on, while Misere hesitates, before reluctantly opening the door, and the two girls leave behind the world of just them. This word, disjoint, perfectly describes this intro sequence. We get a feeling of disconnect and separation throughout the intro, due in part to the discordant OST, the unsteady cinematography, and the contrasting body language. But an hour later for us, and a couple months later for them, the outro tells a different story. The music, the body language, and the cinematography shows a much better relationship than before. The girls are now taking separate paths as they go to their different after-school activities, but they feel much more united in attitude and motivation. Right away, the OST sets a very different tone than before. The intro song, Wind, Glass, Bluebird, is characterized by dissonant notes, short, curt tones, and uneven rhythms. The outro song, Wind, Glass, Girls, retains many of the same traits, but the softer notes and the longer, slower melody is more pleasing, despite the lingering disjointedness. This outro has none of the uneven, uncertain framing from the intro. Here, the girls are always shot evenly, with solid, comfortable angles. Misere is usually framed on the right side of the screen, or moving right, while Nozomi is usually framed on the left, or moving left. The opposite directions and screen space help highlight that now the two are taking their different paths, which are ostensibly away from each other. Despite that, their matching actions and framing also help indicate their similar attitudes, each of them showing much more independence, self-confidence, and focus than before. I love seeing how differently Misere in particular moves compared to before. Movement in her skirt and hair, for example, show off her newfound confidence and self-worth. She now effortlessly enters the band room, and even leads the way for part of their walk home. That said, it's actually important to note that for most of their walk, the two are side by side. Now together, the girls are close in frame, quite unlike the intro's more isolating shots. There is only one moment in which the girls are framed unevenly, briefly talking about band. Misere looks down to Nozomi, a reverse shot from the intro, and Nozomi looks back up, promising to support Misere in the concert as best she can. This line soon after is another perfect encapsulation of this entire segment. They're both saying the same line, "Let's do our best on stage." But just like the first half of this outro, they're not shown on frame together. Different paths, similar attitude, and they're all the closer for it. Without even getting into the meat of the movie, I hope I've been able to demonstrate just how much these scenes have to offer, despite their apparent simplicity, or more likely because of it. I just love how well this 5-minute intro and 4-minute outro are able to set the tone and establish characterization without relying on overt dialogue. Instead of only being told about it, being introduced to these characters and then seeing how much they've grown is a much more personal experience when the OST and visuals help us to see and feel their growth for ourselves. This kind of storytelling is my favorite part of animation, and Liz is just one of many examples of executing it well.